I got a letter from Mom. We're giving everything to Julie. I wasn't invited to the will reading. Months later they showed up at my door. You owe your family a share. My lawyer stepped forward and said, not anymore. Hey Reddit. I don't know what hurt more, losing my mom or realizing I was already forgotten before she died. I was the oldest of 3 kids. Julie was the youngest, always the golden child. And Ryan, the middle one, just went along with whatever caused the least conflict. I didn't mind growing up in Julie's shadow when I was younger. I assumed fairness would eventually find its way into our lives. Maybe in adulthood. But I couldn't have been more wrong. When Mom got sick, I was the one flying in and out of state, taking time off work, losing income just to sit by her side. Julie still lived nearby, Ryan too, but they barely visited. And when they did, it was always for some social media moment. Photos, short videos, smiles for the internet. Nothing meaningful. After Mom passed, I was numb. Completely. But I expected there would at least be closure in the will. Something to show my sacrifices hadn't gone unseen. Instead, I got a letter in the mail. No call. No heads up. Just a formal envelope from a law office. Inside it was short and cold. Per your mother's request, all her assets and properties will be inherited solely by Julie. No explanation. No breakdown. Not even a mention of the small lake cabin Mom and I had spent summers fixing up together. I just sat there, rereading that one sentence again and again until the page blurred. I called the office listed. The assistant told me the will reading had already happened. 2 weeks ago. Apparently, Julie and Ryan were both there. I wasn't even invited. And when I asked why, I was told it was at Julie's request to keep it small and family only. Family only. As if I wasn't one of them. First I tried to move on. I really did. I started therapy, buried myself in work, and tried not to think about the betrayal. I told myself maybe Mom had her reasons. Maybe Julie pressured her. Maybe she changed the will while sick and confused. But months later everything boiled over. One evening there was a knock at my apartment door. I opened it and found Julie, Ryan and their spouses, all dressed like they'd just come from some upscale brunch. Julie was holding a thick folder, and Ryan had that stupid sympathetic look he always gave me when he knew he was about to enable her again. Julie didn't waste time. We need to talk about the house Mom sold 2 years ago. You bought it, right? I nodded slowly. I had taken over payments on Mom's first home and renovated it. It was legally mine, bought, not gifted. Julie flipped open the folder and started quoting numbers. Appraisals, market values, tax histories. Technically, since it was in Mom's name until it transferred to you, and she paid part of the early renovations, that house should be considered part of the estate. You owe the family a share. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The same people who shut me out of the will were now trying to say I owed them money. Julie had the audacity to suggest that unless I paid a reasonable percentage of the home's value, which she calculated to be nearly $200,000, they would pursue legal options. I told them to leave. Firmly. I slammed the door on their fake concern and inflated entitlement. But as I stood there shaking, I knew it wouldn't be the end of it. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I received a formal demand letter from their attorney. Apparently, Julie was serious. She was trying to claim the house I lived in was part of Mom's estate, and that I had somehow stolen it. The thing is, I was ready. I'd kept records, emails, payment receipts, even the sale contract signed by Mom when she sold the house to me 3 years ago. But I also knew I needed more than documents. I needed someone who could go toe-to-toe with Julie's smugness. So I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Samantha Brooks. She was sharp, calm, and completely immune to manipulation. Within a week, she had a formal response drafted, countering every claim and citing clauses in Mom's estate documents that clearly excluded the house from her remaining assets. But the real twist came when Samantha dug deeper and found something Julie hadn't counted on. Apparently, in the last 6 months of Mom's life, there had been a codicil, a legally binding addendum, quietly added to her will. In it, Mom left a sealed letter to be delivered to me only if certain conditions were met. Julie had buried that codicil. The letter had never been sent. Samantha got the court to demand a full review of the will, including every codicil and addendum. That's when we received a scan of Mom's sealed letter, and what I read turned my world upside down. In the letter, Mom apologized. She said she had been pressured by Julie and Ryan in her final months, that she didn't feel strong enough to argue, that they had manipulated her during treatments. She wrote that she never stopped loving me, and that she knew the house I bought was mine, purchased with my own money and effort. She even added that the lake cabin was meant to be mine, no matter what the will said. It was the first time I had cried in months. Finally, something made sense. Mom had been taken advantage of, and I had been cut out. Not out of malice, but out of exhaustion and coercion. With the letter and documentation, Samantha filed an official motion to block Julie's claim and pursue legal accountability for hiding the codicil. Julie and Ryan were subpoenaed. Their smugness began to crack. When the day of the hearing came, I walked in with Samantha by my side. Julie and Ryan looked stunned. They didn't expect me to fight back. Julie tried one last time to make her case. She spoke about family, duty, and fairness. How it was wrong for one sibling to have so much while the rest had nothing. But then Samantha stood up, and everything shifted. She laid out the timeline. The documents. The letter from Mom. The buried codicil. She even brought up a clause in the state inheritance laws regarding undue influence and manipulation of a mentally declining individual, which is exactly what Julie had done. Her so-called airtight plan started to crumble in real time. And then, with the calm confidence of someone who knew she had already won, Samantha turned to the judge and said, "Not anymore." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the rustle of the paper as my lawyer placed the original letter from my mother onto the evidence table. The judge leaned in and read carefully, his brow tightening as he absorbed every word. Julie, who had been glowing with confidence just minutes earlier, suddenly looked pale. She reached for her water but barely took a sip. Ryan sat next to her, his foot tapping under the table, eyes darting around like a guilty child waiting for punishment. The same people who excluded me from the will reading now sat frozen in a room where the truth finally had a voice. Samantha didn't waste time. She explained how the codicil had been discovered, buried in an overlooked envelope from the estate lawyer's archives. How the letter made it abundantly clear that my mother had regrets, and that her true intention had been to leave both sentimental and material assets more evenly, particularly the lake cabin, which Julie had claimed for herself. The key moment came when Samantha turned the court's attention to the email records I had kept, especially the digital trail from my bank and my mother's notarized sale agreement for the house. Every payment, every signature, every document was legally in place. It wasn't just morally right. It was airtight in the eyes of the law. Julie tried to interrupt. She stammered something about me manipulating Mom while she was sick. But Samantha calmly responded that if manipulation was to be discussed, we should revisit the numerous financial transfers Julie received during those last months, many of which coincided with changes to the will. The courtroom shifted. The energy tilted in our favor. Then the judge spoke. He said the codicil carried legal weight, and while it didn't entirely nullify the primary will, it raised enough concern to call into question the legitimacy of Julie's influence. He referred to a precedent case involving undue pressure on an ailing parent, and explained that if it could be proven that Mom was manipulated into excluding me, certain parts of the will could be contested or adjusted. But then came the ruling on the house. The judge turned toward Julie's attorney and stated, in no uncertain terms, that the house in question had been sold well before any change to the will, for full market value, and paid for entirely by the plaintiff, me. He concluded that any attempt to include it in the estate post-sale was not only unfounded, but bordered on malicious misuse of legal resources. Julie's lawyer slumped slightly, realizing they'd lost that piece entirely. Then came the bombshell. The judge granted my motion to petition for a reassessment of the estate based on the suppressed codicil. That meant the distribution Julie thought she had locked in, including the lake cabin, our grandmother's heirloom jewelry, and even Mom's savings account, were now frozen and subject to reallocation. Julie stood up. "This is insane." She was sick. She didn't know what she was doing. The judge interrupted her. Enough. The court recognizes the legal validity of the codicil. Your actions in withholding it are now under review. You may want to retain additional counsel. He turned pale. Ryan didn't even try to defend her. He leaned back and covered his mouth with his hand. After the hearing, I walked out into the hallway and took the deepest breath I had in months. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there, feeling the weight of silence. Not emptiness, release. Samantha looked over at me. It's not over yet, she said. But it's about to be. Over the next few weeks, the court proceedings continued behind the scenes. Julie's finances were audited. Several bank transfers were flagged as potential coercion-related transactions. Emails were subpoenaed. Screenshots were shown. Messages where Julie told a friend she was glad I was finally cut out, and bragged about Mom being too tired to argue anymore. The court appointed a neutral executor to reassess the distribution of the estate. And while I didn't get everything back, I got what mattered most. The lake cabin was returned to me. Mom's final note, the one that had been hidden, was entered into the public record. Julie was issued a formal censure for deliberately suppressing a legal document, though she narrowly avoided full criminal charges. Ryan, in his usual passive way, tried to apologize. One afternoon, he sent a message saying he didn't know what Julie had done, that he thought I'd been informed of the will reading, and that he'd gone along because he didn't want to stir things up. I didn't respond. Sometimes silence is all you can offer someone who stood by while you were erased. Julie, on the other hand, didn't take the loss well. She posted rants online, claimed the court had been manipulated, that I had smeared her name, that I stole what was rightfully hers. But most people who knew her saw the truth for what it was. One comment I'll never forget came from our old neighbor, Mrs. Dew. Funny how the only one who never bragged about what she was getting is the one who actually earned it. In the end, I didn't care about the money. I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted peace. The cabin became that place for me. I took a few months off work, went up there alone, and let myself finally grieve, without feeling betrayed or erased. The old dock Mom and I rebuilt was still standing. I sat there every morning with coffee, watching the sun rise across the lake, feeling her with me in every creak of the wood, every ripple of the water. She hadn't forgotten me. She had just been too tired to fight. But I wasn't. And I made sure that the people who tried to silence her, and me, walked away empty-handed.